Hey, I mean, that was a good point.
I think we might start seeing some go back. We hit week 10. 2 more weeks left in the 2A season. Big games last week that we're about to talk about. Big games this week that we're about to preview. Hello, everybody. Terry Bennett, Grant Goodwin here. Sideline to Sideline, the Class 2A edition, right here on L4 Media, brought to you by Sideline SI Design and Printing. Man, it's been a long week for me. First off, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well, man. Week 10, we're getting closer to the playoffs.
Feels like football weather finally.
It does. The rain will probably be in rain on Friday.
Yeah, we'll probably be in rain on Friday. We're going to be at a 4A game in Deep East Texas. It's actually going to be cold this Halloween, it looks like. I don't remember the last time it was actually cold. But we're going to be talking to a football in this show, as we do each and every week. This is, we're at that point now, and it's so funny. Like 2 weeks ago, you and I are trying to pull games for previewing and stuff, and we're like, man, there's just not a lot of good games. Mm-hmm. The 2A gods were great to these districts this year because it feels like week 10 and week 11, and last week to an extent, there are some, region-defining games happening.
Yeah, there are. And, the seeding is on the line, so yeah. But, man, this last week was great.
Yeah, and speaking of East Texas, let's start in Northeast Texas. I don't know, some people call it just North Texas.
Do you think this was the game of the week in the state? I know it was, at least in North Texas, right?
I think it was. I think everybody was, and of course we're talking Cooper versus Honeygrove. Everybody was wondering, would Cooper be able to score on that defense that had only given up 3 points? They were, but there's a caveat. Honeygrove had a few special teams mistakes that gave Cooper short field, so that did help the Bulldogs. But I still contend that this game shows that while Honeygrove is better than they were last year, they're still a touchdown down from Cooper, at least at this point.
Yeah, Cooper 34, Honeygrove 21. Cooper's Cannon Ingram, quarterback, threw for 90 yards and ran for 183. Markel Smith had 2 rushing touchdowns. But it was that Cooper defense really only allowed Honeygrove's Dion Moore 68 yards rushing. 50 of that was on one play.
Yeah, that's one of the things we kept talking about, the Honeygrove defense, and we weren't really talking about that Bulldog defense, and they came to play in this game. And for me,
because Cooper has, on their schedule, they have played Collinsville, very potent offensive attack, and then Hooks, which is very potent up in 3A. So that's not an easy road to hoe for this Cooper defense.
Yep.
They slayed one dragon and lost to Hooks, but it was very respectable against Hooks.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that gets lost when you're just looking at numbers sometimes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you kind of forget, and it's kind of going back to what we talked about with Honeygrove. Who you play matters. Yeah, Honeygrove was putting up a lot of great stats, and I'm not saying they're going to have to go across the state to find competition, but I do think if they're wanting to be one of the better programs in the region and in the state, they need to up their non-district game a little bit.
Yeah. But what do you do?
Well, right? Cooper was able to get Collinsville. It's like I said, you don't have to go find a Refugio. Go find a Muenster. Go find a Collinsville. Mm-hmm. Go find a Celeste. Celeste is a very athletic team that's going to test
step up in classification.
Step up in classifications. Play a Hooks.
Mid-tier or even a top echelon. That's right.
Yeah, like Cooper did. Play a Jefferson. There's tons. Play a Commerce. There's tons of teams you can play.
I don't think this game was decided by one team played a tougher schedule, though. I think
I think it helps, though.
It might help a little bit, but I think you are who you are, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Cooper just came in, they ran the ball, and played tough defense, and that's probably the nuts and bolts of it.
You know who wasn't playing tough defense?
Who's that?
Groover and Sunray, but man, what a heck of a game that was. Sunray goes in at half, up 34-8.
Right.
Game's over, right? Hey, turn it off if you're watching it. Let's focus on other things. Oh, Groover said, hey, wait, not so fast. As they score 42 points to beat Sunray 42-41.
They scored like 27 unanswered points, right?
Yeah.
To get back into it, I think.
I was trying to find the stat. I think it was. I think because Sunray did score one touchdown to then retake the lead, and then Groover came back again, and then the 2-point play. Good gutsy call on the 2-point conversion. But hey, you do that you do that sometimes when you feel like you feel like you've got momentum, and also B, you go, I don't know if I really want to take this into overtime.
Oh yeah. You're kind of spent. You look at your dudes, and they're just, they're right on the verge. Yeah. Sometimes you want to just get it over with. Let's just do or die right here. And I commend the coaching staff for making that call too, because that is not an easy call.
Well, and sometimes the act of coming back just wears your guys down, and you've got the other team on their back heels. I mean, and it, you and I have talked about this many times when it comes to games like this. As far as when we're evaluating, it's like, what do you take more important? Do you take the second half that Groover dominated or the first half that Sunray dominated? I'm taking them both and still feel like both of these teams are region threats. But for Sunray, you've got to see how long is this going to sting. And for Groover, are you going to let this become a win hangover? Because how many times have we seen that?
Right.
Big comeback, big win against a ranked team or a district rival. And then the next week, you just kind of come out flat.
Exactly. All right. How about Granger, 17, Chilton, 14. Granger's quarterback, Chase Edwards, 11 of 23 for 188 yards passing and ran for 204 yards on 28 keepers.
Yeah, it felt like we kept talking about Chilton all year. And I know we talked about them against Hearn and on. Granger, I think, was the first time was last week when we kind of, talked about this game. And here they get the big win. Their only two losses are to Hawley and to Bremond. The whole district, now you've got Bremond at 2-1, Chilton at 2-1, Granger at 2-1. We have what we love, and that's chaos at the very end. You've also got Iola at 2-1. So you've got four teams that are coming into the last 2 weeks of the season, and they all feel that they have a chance to win district. Now, for Iola, they're going to get to prove it because they lost to Granger, but they've got Chilton and Bremond next. I think we're going to talk about that in the next segment. They got Bremond and Chilton over the next 2 weeks. But for Granger, huge win for them.
Yeah, it is. I think I kind of felt like Chilton might take this game going into it.
Yeah, I think we both picked it. We both picked it.
Yeah, so huge win for Granger. All right, couple of quick hitters real quick. Beckville, 68, Frankston, 28. Any thoughts on that one? Just kind of Beckville being Beckville, right?
Yeah, we're going to talk about Beckville. They actually have a pretty salty Harleton team they're playing this week. I think it's interesting, but, we've said it before, and I'll say it again. For all the talk about last year and how they responded to that Tempson loss, they didn't respond really well, a lot of people felt. That's why they got upset and all that. To me, this year, I've been so impressed with how Beckville's responded because they haven't just went out and won. They have absolutely went out and dominated. I'm talking
everybody.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, we're talking scoring.
They put up 92 a couple of weeks
92
ago.
Against Hawkins. They've scored 68 against Franklin. They scored 72 about 3 weeks ago. Frankston, excuse me. They scored 70.
Franklin, wow. Man, they're salty.
Well, that's why they lost to Lorena. They had to play two teams at once. And then also 72 a couple of weeks ago. I don't know what that means as far as this region. I still think they're just a bad matchup nightmare against Tempson. But moving Williams over to quarterback and kind of running him more of that wildcat, but he still throws, to me, has completely changed what Beckville's doing.
Yeah. Albany 44, Roscoe 7. Roscoe entered this game with only what? 2 losses, I think.
Yeah, we had that as one of our games last week, and we said we thought Albany would win comfortably. I didn't really think they'd win that comfortably. I thought they'd win by a couple touchdowns, but to just absolutely dominate, I mean, it's Albany. What else can you say?
Yeah. Refugio 26, Shiner 7. A little bit closer than I thought. I believe you thought it would be about like this, and so kudos to you for picking that one. Refugio's Keelan Brown, 12 of 17 for 211 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. Ernest Campbell, 4 catches for 63 yards.
Again, they use him where they need him now, and then they unleash him come playoffs. I'm going to say this about Shiner. You do not want to play them in the playoffs. I mean, I'm not saying that they're going to make a region run, but I'm saying if you're the first or second place team and you're going, hey, we're getting a third place team. Oh, crap, it's Shiner. Because
look at their losses, right?
Exactly. Hallettsville, Industrial, East Bernard, and then Refugio. And I will say this. I legitimately only thought it was going to stay close because there's that Shiner pride, and it is a rivalry. And that's literally from everybody said. They said at times it felt like Refugio should have taken control of the game. Shiner would make a play. What happens in a rivalry game? But still, I'm just saying I would not want to play that Shiner team here in the playoffs.
All right, Tempson 69, Joaquin 0. Joaquin came in with only 1 or 2 losses, I believe.
Well, now they've been struggling on the year, but they've been all close. This game was more of just a reminder. We do this in 4A with Carthage. This is just a reminder.
What was Joaquin's record, or what is it now?
Joaquin is now 1-7.
Oh, why did I think? I don't know.
Because we were used to last year, and
I guess so.
But again, you go and look at who they've lost to. They lost to ARP. They lost to Beckville. They lost to Shelbyville, to Garrison, and to St. Augustine by 1 point 2 weeks ago. And that kind of felt like that was their their Alamo. And that's why I was curious about this game, because I was curious to see what Joaquin would do in this one. And I think it's safe to say that their nice little run they've had the last few years, at least right now, is over. And again, they're really young this year. I think they returned 3 on defense, 3 on offense. But still, for the Rams, I kind of thought I'd see a little bit more fight.
All right. That's going to do it for last week. How about this week? Big games.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start with the Beckville. You've got Beckville versus Harleton. Again, we've talked about what Beckville's done all year. We haven't really – I don't think we've talked Harleton at all. The Wildcats on the year, they're 4-0. They're 7-1 overall, 4-0 in district, I should say. When looking at who their only loss at the beginning of the year was Price Carlisle. Since then, they beat Rivercrest, White Oak, Maud, Frankston, Union Grove, Big Sandy. They scored 72 in that game, and then 35 against Hawkins. I'm not going to say that this team is going to beat Beckville, but I think Kyle Little's squad can give them a little bit of trouble defensively at times.
That defensive front needs to play very well, though.
Oh, yeah.
The Williams kid.
They've got to – I mean, I don't even know if it's just the Williams kid. You start with him with Beckville, and they go 3 deep, it feels like.
Yeah.
I just feel like if we get to see Beckville in person this year in the playoffs, I'm going to think you and I are going to look and go, is this the same team we saw in the first week?
Well, they didn't look bad against Tempson.
No, that's a good point.
I think things just kind of rolled downhill on them really quick. You know, Tempson got out to a quick start with J.J. Garner. I think they had something to prove, Tempson did, with Bussy being out, and they just threw the wet blanket all over Beckville. And Beckville just – by the time they woke up, they just could not respond.
You know, you bring up a really good point there. I think going in on the outside, it looked like, oh, Beckville needs to prove themselves. This is Tempson. But Tempson got tired of hearing, and not that they don't like Bussy, of course, but as a team, they got tired of hearing it's Bussy and the Dwarves. It's not. I mean, J.J. Garner, I'm going to go and tell you right now, that dude transitions next year as the starting quarterback, and I've already got them as region favorites again, because he is – and he offers different things that Bussy does at quarterback, and I'm not saying one is better. I think Bussy's a better overall, but I don't think J.J. Garner's too far behind. Now
you got to remember Vosky Howard too.
Does he not seem like he gets kind of lost in a good way for Tempson? He's that type of guy. We talked about it before. He'll probably end up with 800-900 yards receiving and then go through the playoffs and have almost 1,000 in the playoffs alone, because they will force feed him the ball when he gets those one-on-one matchups.
Yep.
Now, in this game, I still like Beckville, but I just think if Beckville is starting to kind of peek ahead and starting to look at, you know, the region matchups and where will they see Tempson and all that, I think that they could get snake bit. I still have them winning, but it's not easy to go down into Harleton, Texas and win a game right now.
I still got Beckville by 7 to 14 points.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly right. I'd even say maybe 14 to 21.
Okay.
Let's go over into Central North Texas. We have a show called the Muenster Football Show, where each and every week I talk to Brady Carney of the Hornets, and they've got their district championship this week as they're going to take on Collinsville. And I know Celeste is still there too, but I still think the winner of Collinsville Muenster is going to be your district champ. But man, Collinsville's a different beast this year. Their one loss on the year was to Cooper, a game that they got down early, almost were able to make the comeback. Cooper ran the clock out on them. I don't know, for all the talk about all the players, I don't know if there's a better quarterback in this division than Logan Jenkins.
Yeah, almost 2,900 yards passing so far this year. He's got 3 really good receivers in Colin Barnes, Rylan Newman, and Landon Carpenter.
And that's not even talking about Carter Scott, who has not played. And it feels like in 2A, and maybe this is how it's always been. Again, this is the first year we've been completely eyes in on 2A. It feels like there's 5 or 6 players across the state that may play or may not play at all this year. Carter Scott's one of them. If he doesn't play, Collinsville's going to be really good. If he does play, that could be the difference in them finally breaking through in this region.
Yeah, well, they might break through without him, you know.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. That they still could. And Muenster, you know, last year they came in with a ton of seniors. They were 12-1 2 years ago. What was it? 4 years ago they won state. They really felt that they were going to be back at that level last year, and then they just got hit hard with injuries. Remember Colton Decker, the stud, he was out for half the season. And Coach Carney's admitted that there might have been some not caring about much as winning, and sometimes it happens with a senior locker room. This year they're young. They got a Voth kid that's back, Dawson Voth, Seth Stoffels, all are good players in their own. All have had brothers that have played for this program. And they've got a young quarterback in Casey Carney. I like Muenster. I think Muenster could be a dark horse in this region, depending on their draw. I just don't like them in this game because when you're a team with Logan Jenkins and that passing offense, you feast on young secondaries. And Muenster's a young secondary.
Yeah. I don't want to say Collinsville names their score, but it's pretty close. Right?
I really do appreciate Coach Carney because he's one of those honest ones. At the beginning of the year, he's like, it's Collinsville and everybody else. and they've kept that going.
Yeah.
Speaking of that area, what about Seymour and Windthorst?
Yeah, Seymour 7-1, Windthorst 6-2. Seymour's all-everything quarterback Braden Lloyd, 2,585 yards passing so far. But, Windthorst has a really good quarterback in Brock Belcher, a true threat quarterback. This is going to be an interesting game.
Windthorst the last couple of years, they've kind of been exactly like Muenster. Good, but not where they were a few years ago when they were playing 14, 15 games. This year, they've played what I'd call two really good teams. Well, three if you want to count Henrietta, and Henrietta's solid. They beat Henrietta. They lost to Muenster 16-6. They lost to Bremont 35-13. That tells me that offense has struggled against good defenses. And Seymour, I think, has got a pretty solid defense.
Yeah, I do too. You don't get to 7-1 being a porous defense, right?
Yeah, and on the year, the only time that they've given up more than 30 points was to Albany. Their one loss, and again, that's Albany. What are you going to do about that?
Right.
Just to give a little comparison, and we don't do this for things, but on the year, they're averaging 45 points, and Windthorst is averaging 32. I like Seymour in this game by a touchdown.
I think Seymour wins this football game, but I do think it is close. And, hey, the Trojans could pull it out. But, give me Seymour if we're betting on this, right?
All right, yep.
Are we betting?
Yeah, what do you want to bet?
Steak dinner in Logansport, Louisiana.
On bread.
With bread on top, right?
No, on bread.
Oh, I thought you said on bread.
You want bread on your steak?
I thought there's bread.
Yeah,
they
put bread on top of the steak. It's really cool. And it's like by the time it gets to you, it's all soaked up. So the bread's like a sponge,
Has all the blood in it.
Yeah, it just gives you direct
30 seconds on each side for the steak.
Mm-hmm.
Let the bread. Oh, okay.
And then that basically what that ensures is that the gravy goes right to your heart and hardens immediately. So you're going to die happy. You're going to die instantly, but you're going to die happy.
Yeah, I'll let you have the keys to the truck just in case.
Okay. Where you want to go now?
How about Stanford and Hawley? This ought to be a darn good game. Stanford enters the game 7-0. Hawley 6-2. Hawley has played Albany, right?
Yeah.
So, that's a pretty tough schedule there. But Stanford has their quarterback, Christian Duran, who threw for like 202 yards last week against Anson, two really good receivers in Quentin Pryor and Drew Falks. Hawley, of course, Landon Sikora, running back, linebacker, great linebacker.
Oh, yeah.
Way. Keegan Abels at quarterback.
And they got another Abels kid that they have a junior as one of them is a junior. The other one's a freshman. And by all accounts, both of them are really good. So, man, Hawley just seems to keep reloading that quarterback position.
Yeah. So who do you like in this one?
I like Hawley. I think their offensive diversity, man, when you go and look at what they've done on the year, that they've got one wide receiver in Deontay Ramon, who's their big game breaker, and he's got like 800 yards. But they also have Myers with 500 yards, the freshman Abels with 235. They've got at least 7 receivers having 80 yards or more.
Well, that's just spreading it out.
When you can spread that out, and you and I always talk about we're in an age where it's not about your strengths on defense. It's about the offenses finding your weaknesses. And if you got that many wide receivers, I don't care if you're at 2A up to 5A. 6A, you might can have a good enough secondary that you can go, hey, we can man up 6 guys and we're good.
Right.
Anything below, that becomes an issue. And the thing is when you think you're going to get Abels, bring him down with pressure, he doesn't really run for tons of yards, but I was watching some film. He does a great job of stepping up into the pocket when needing to, bailing out and finding his targets. I like Stanford this year, but I like the Bearcats in this game.
Yeah, same here. All right, Mart and Dawson. Mart undefeated. Dawson 7-1. Mart's going to come at you with J.D. Bell, a lot of J.D. Bell at running back, but DeMontrell Medlock at quarterback and D'Angelo Rhodes at receiver. That's just a potent Mart offense. Their defense is really good. I think it comes down to Dawson's offense with Colby Springer at running back and the 2 receivers, Allen and Easley. How are they going to do against that quick Mart defense, right?
You said it best. There are certain games that when you want to talk about a team like Mart, which we really haven't got a lot to, because a lot of it's just who they've played and where they're at, you find a game like this and this looks really good. Remember, 2 years ago, Dawson had to forfeit this game. And then last year, I don't think they played this game. I think it speaks to exactly what Mart's going to do. And you and I were talking about this on one of the road trips. The fact that Mart is number 2 in the state, yet nobody's talking about them, to me bodes well for them. Yeah, because I think what part of the thing that's happened over the last few years as they've quote unquote struggled, losing in a state championship, losing in a region final. That's so tough. But I think part of it is there's just so much noise. We'll talk about in the 3A game, 3A show with Franklin finally losing that winning streak. I think sometimes that's the best thing that can happen for a program.
Oh yeah. So sometimes there's worse things than a loss.
Exactly. And I think Kevin Hoffman and this squad this year, I think they've been feeding on that. Hey, nobody's talking about us. Everybody's talking about everybody else. I think Mart names their score in this one.
Yeah, I think they could. All right, Shelbyville and Tempson, just real quick on this one. I like Tempson, but DJ Barnes, quarterback for Shelbyville, can make things interesting, but I just don't think they have the horses to match up with Tempson.
Yeah, part of this is over the last few years, there's been somebody in district that has at least kind of given Tempson a game. I still think it'll be Garrison next week.
It's going to be Garrison.
But just going on the road to Shelbyville, looking ahead, you've got Garrison. That's the big matchup between 2 state-ranked teams. You've got the playoffs. Can you finally finish? This could be a game where Tempson walks in and might be looking ahead. But I say that's where you get a player like Terry Bussey that can gather the troops and be like, all right, we got to focus on this one if they get down. I like Tempson by a lot.
All right, 2 quick hitters. Sterling City, 6-2 at Wink, 8-1. Give me Wink.
Feels like we've been talking about Wink a lot this year.
Yeah.
I mean, not in a bad way at all. The Eagles of Sterling City, they're 6-2. Their only losses were to Roscoe. Really good loss, 27-14. And then last week, they lost to El Dorado, 24-0. If anybody was there injuries? Was there something we don't know about? I don't know. That came out of nowhere. Not that El Dorado's bad, but El Dorado's 2-2.
You got to call them El Dorado.
El Dorado, excuse me.
Yeah.
El Dorado's 2-2. They lost to Wink, and they lost pretty bad, 49-14. They lost to Sonora, 39-13. So they have quality losses, but not by quality scores.
Right.
I like Wink in this one by a lot.
Yeah, I do too. All right, Iola and Chilton. Iola 6-2. Chilton 7-1. Chilton coming off that loss to Granger last week. Give me Chilton on the rebound on this one.
Yeah, I like Iola this year as far as what they've done. And the last 4 years have just been a slog. 4-4 in that odd COVID year, 2-7, 2-8. This year they've responded with a 6-2 year, 2-1. They control their playoff destiny, but they've got Chilton and Bremont in the last 2 games, as we talked about.
Tough,
now, the great thing is they've beat everybody behind them, and that's always the most important thing. If you're the 4th place team, just make sure you beat everybody below.
Getting into the tournament,
yes,
right?
Getting into the tournament, especially when you haven't been in a while, then a lot of times that's your goal, and there's nothing wrong with that. In saying all that, I think Chilton's really mad after that, and I think that they're able to not name their score, but possibly name their score.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, I believe that's it.
All right. Well, that's a fast 2A show. Now, don't worry. In a couple of weeks when the playoffs start, we completely change how we do this. We pick every playoff game. For the rest of the playoffs, we start in the first 2 weeks are pretty long shows, but we'll pick every game. We won't really do a ton of reviews. It's mainly just quick previews, pick the game and move on. Next week, probably be another show like this, 20, 25 minutes as we're just kind of wrapping up who are making the playoffs, who might win district, and all that fun stuff. If you have any questions, thoughts, or comments, email them to us, Grant and Terry at s2ssport.com. Find us on Facebook, Sideline to Sideline, on Twitter, at Grant and Terry. And until next time, he's Grant, I'm Terry. This has been Sideline to Sideline, the 2A edition, brought to you by SI Design and Printing.
Hey, I mean, that was a good point.
I think we might see